Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in again. I appreciate you joining me for another one of my journeys with Jack. Today I'm speaking about Venice to Milan, and in keeping with this, I'm wearing an Italian suit. All right, so here's how we did it. It was a few years back. My wife Eleanor and I came from Slovenia across the Adriatic into Venice. Now I'm going to suggest this is the best way to go, at least it's my favorite. I've been to Venice 3 times. Twice I came in via the Ferrovia train station over on the western side of the city. It's better coming, in my opinion, from the water side. It's a lot like the James Bond movie From Russia with Love, where Sean Connery and the heroine, they are seen coming into Venice from that side, riding around. You get some good Adriatic views of St. Mark's Square. So we boarded the Prince of Venice ferry in Isola, Slovenia. There's also a boat that goes from Piran, Slovenia. Now, the coastline of Slovenia is rather compact, so these are very close towns. And it's really intended as a day trip. So you leave very early in the morning, around 7:30 or so, and cross the Adriatic, about a 2.5, 3 hour crossing. And then you're expected to tour Venice during the day and then come back. Well, we got on the boat with a gaggle of German school children on holiday, and they were quite lively. It was quite interesting, but we took luggage on the boat, and that was a bit unusual. So we got over to Italy, and as everybody's getting off the boat and passports are being checked, they looked at us, the constabulary did, and said, "Americano?" And we said, "Si," and showed our passport. And then they looked at our luggage, and they kind of looked questioningly at us, and I said, "Yeah, we're staying." And they asked, "Anything to declare?" And we said, "No." And typical Italian fashion, they really didn't care, so they said, "Just go on in." So we got on a vaporetta and away we went. We had to do it this way because we've been traveling through Eastern Europe from Prague down to Budapest and then over to Slovenia and then on to Italy. So it worked out rather well for us, a little bit unconventional, but there's a tip in there for you that, think outside the box, because sometimes you can just utilize various different transit methods and it works out rather well for you. It did for us. Anyway, we got on a vaporetta. A vaporetta is like a municipal bus in Venice, and if you remember, the roadways in Venice basically are water. So if you're going on a motorized craft, you're going around the roadways. Otherwise, Venice is predominantly a pedestrian city. Occasionally you'll see something motorized on one of the walkways through the town. But we got on the Vaporetto, and we were very fortunate. They didn't ask for a fare, and we didn't have to give one. And then we rode over across town near the train station and deposited our bags at La Universiario Hotel. Very adequate. And then we got back on a Vaporetto and rode the other direction over to St. Mark's Square. Now, I'd like to point out that I'm high on coming into Venice via boat because your first view really from the Adriatic, far out on the Adriatic, is the Campanile, which had really been built initially maybe about AD 1000 or 1050, and it was added on to make it taller and taller for the purpose of being seen from the Adriatic. Remember that Venice was a very powerful city-state made wealthy by trading via shipping lanes throughout the Mediterranean. So they utilized the Campanile also as a landmark so that the ship captains could see it coming back up the Adriatic and turn into Venice. So the Campanile serves a dual purpose as a navigational aid, but also it is the bell tower of the Basilica di San Marco, which is the giant church there at St. Mark's Square. So great coming in from the water side. You see first the Campanile, then it opens up. You see the square, statuary, the Doge's Palace, the famous gilt bronze horses atop the basilica, etc. So getting back over to St. Mark's, we reached it and there was a plethora of tourists, but an even greater number of pigeons. The pigeons will land all over the tourists. It's fascinating. I've got a picture in there somewhere that you can look at on, let's see, Facebook, Instagram, of a couple of tourists with their arms outstretched and the pigeons landing on them and their heads, etc. It's kind of a expected thing to happen in St. Mark's, and the pigeons are quite tame. They've been fed for centuries, so I guess it's ingrained in their nature. So when we got there, we looked, and the line was rather long at the Basilica, so we decided to go to the Doge's Palace first. Glad we did. This was my third visit. I love it each time. One thing that stands out to me is this brilliant red and white marble checkerboard pattern on the floors as you're entering and along some of the hallways, stairways, etc. The Doge's Palace was the home of the ruler of Venice. Probably the most famous was Enrico Dandolo, who unfortunately goes down in history in I suppose, a notorious light, as he was the one that convinced the knights on the Fourth Crusade to sack the city of Constantinople. A little bit more on that later. Anyway, the Doge had a personal apartment in the Doge's palace. Then there were rooms whereby they conducted court and also where the Senate would meet. Between the courtroom and the dungeon area was a hallway or passageway known as the Bridge of Sighs, because people would either sigh in despair or relief if they got out of the courtroom or were free, but if things went bad, they were heading across that Bridge of Sighs and then on down to the dungeon down below. Well, the Doge's Palace is intended to make a statement about the wealth and power of Venice, and it's successful. The largest oil painting in the world, 25 feet by 75 feet, hangs in the Doge's Palace. The other artworks are just spectacular. It's really got to be seen to be believed. It's really opulent. And this, you have to remember, is in spite of the fact that it was looted in 1797 or so by Napoleon and his henchmen when they took over Venice, and they took gold and silver galore from the Doge's Palace and the Basilica and had them melted down and put into a treasury in France. So, having finished with the Doge's Palace, we noticed that the line had decreased at the Basilica San Marco, so we went over to that gorgeous church and viewed it. Now, the striking feature of the gilt horses on the facade outside at the entrance to the church are from that sacking of the city of Constantinople by the Fourth Crusade about 1204 AD. So the Crusaders were meant to go over and help liberate parts of the Holy Land and make Jerusalem safe for European Christian tourists and pilgrims going there to visit the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, site of Jesus' tomb, also area of his crucifixion and subsequent resurrection. So, unfortunately, the crusade got in debt to the Venetians, who were building ships to transport the crusade, and they were somehow convinced, rather dubiously, to attack another Christian city, Constantinople, and they basically robbed it blind. So many of the things in the Basilica San Marco come from Constantinople, the icons, mosaics, etc. This place is dripping of wealth. It has intricate marble, gold, silver mosaics, really from floor to ceiling, decorating the walls, the floor, the columns, the archways, etc. Also, there is the tomb of St. Mark the Evangelist. Now, the bulk of his remains were removed from a church in Alexandria, Egypt, possibly under dubious means, I'll let you be the judge of that, by the Venetian traders, and they brought them to Venice, and St. Mark is the patron saint of the city of Venice. Anyway, fascinating tomb, holds relics from the evangelist, also has a piece of the true cross of Jesus Christ. That was looted from Constantinople as well. Now, the original horses that were taken from Constantinople and were on the outside of the church are now placed inside for preservation. They were removed in the 1980s. I was fortunate on my first trip in the early 1980s to Venice to have seen them in their initial place where they stayed for about, I suppose it would have been maybe 700, 800 years after the sacking of Constantinople. But now they're indoors because of need for preservation. It was an old alloy principally made of copper and was getting deteriorated due to worldwide pollution, etc. Well, after viewing the basilica, in which I was able to clandestinely take a couple of photographs, we left there and went back via Vaporetta and stopped along the way at different places to do a little shopping and eating. We had great appetizers at a place called Taverno de Barrio, and then later had the hottest pizza I've ever put in my mouth at the AA Oce Venezia. So subsequently, as off to bed, the next morning we got up and went by ferry across to the island of Murano. Now, many of you may recognize the name of that from the various types of Murano glass that you can get here in the States, but more prominently overseas in Italy, and it makes great costume jewelry, necklaces, earrings, etc. But this glass is hand blown, and sometimes it is added a little bit of gold leaf to it to enhance it. But this is done in centuries-old technique, and you can see the glass blowers blow down through a lawn tube with glass on the end that's molten, and it expands, and then they can turn the tube, shape it different ways. Really quite skillful. Now, granted, it's a tourist hustle to have people come in there and pay to watch them blow the glass, but hey man, there's nothing like it, at least not that I've seen, so it's well worth it. Now, there is a great bargain on the island of Murano. The food and drink is about 1/3 the cost of what you pay in Venice, so make sure you do a meal while you're over there. Well, we did all day over there looking at the glass blowing, fascinating, and then wandering around the island. And then coming back, we spent the remainder of the day shopping, especially in the Rialto Bridge area. Great place to get some souvenirs. I actually bought this bow tie in Venice along that Rialto Bridge shopping area. My wife got some kind of super cool, possibly authentic fake, if you remember my talk on Istanbul, how they divide these things up into fakes, authentic fakes, and then the real thing, some kind of designer bag. And away we went, slept in a little bit, and the next morning we got on the train to go up to Milan. So we got a little bit confused about which compartment we were in, but we were very fortunate. A very kindly gentleman from Switzerland who spoke excellent English helped us on, and we actually wound up in a better compartment. We were in a first-class compartment for the ride up to Milan. And the gentleman was so kind, he gave us some travel log on Switzerland, and he actually convinced us that we should carry on from Milan all the way up to Ascona, Switzerland. Initially, we thought we'd just stay around Stresa in the Lake District, and that'll be my next subject about Italy. But this man gave us a great travel log and convinced us to take the car all the way into Switzerland. Glad he did, but more on that subsequently. So we took the train, reached Milan, and then had about a 1/4 mile walk with our luggage over to the hotel. Now, let me give you another tip. Please make sure you take bags that roll when you go to Europe. It's easy to get around, very good public transportation, but Europeans are used to walking a little bit more distance than we do here in the States, so just be cognizant of that fact. So we got to the hotel, dumped our bags, and then we got on the metro. You want to take the M1 line, and let's see, I want to read you the stop so I don't mess it up. You want to go to the Conciliazione stop if you wish to see Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper. That was the reason we put Milan in this trip, was I specifically wanted to go see that painting called La Ultima Cena. You have to make reservations in advance, which we did from here in the States, and you pay. It's about $15 for adults over 25, which you can look at me and tell I fall in that category. Anyway, so once you've paid and you get there, it's about a 2-minute walk from the metro station, but when you get there, you get a time that you're going to come back and see the painting. So that's how we did it, and we waited around a little bit, then we went in, and when you go in to see the painting, it's like the old TV show Get Smart, later remade as a Steve Carell movie. Anyhow, you go in through a set of doors, they open, you walk in, they close, then another set of doors waits a minute, then it opens, then it closes. You go do this about 3 times. It's really kind of like secret agent stuff. And that's to prevent dust and other impurities and outside air directly affecting the fresco. So when you get in, you can see that the fresco's been attempted to be repaired several times. It's very fragile. It was massive. I would say it was probably about 10 feet tall, 60 feet wide. I was also amazed at the detail. You can clearly see the feet underneath the table, and it's just a testament to the genius of Leonardo da Vinci. To paint hands and feet is very intricate, and he did such a great job. It looks so realistic. Now, on the opposite wall is a fresco of the Crucifixion of Christ done by a different artist. So You can't take pictures in this place, but you can stay for a pretty long time. My wife and I found 2 chairs, and it was really liberating, not trying to get the perfect picture shot, but just to admire the brilliant artwork. So that's what we did. So leaving there, we looked at the nearby Castle Sforza, named for one of the Dukes of Milan, who had it built as a fortress around the 15th century. And then we had some time to look at the statue of Giuseppe Garibaldi, who was sort of the George Washington figure of Italy, having helped unify Italy in the 1800s. So then, it being Sunday night, there were not a lot of restaurants open. We had some excellent Turkish kebab and trundled off to bed. The next morning, we took the time to go see the grave of the Catholic ecclesiastical bishop, Ambrose, who was very instrumental in fighting against the Arian controversy in the 2nd and 3rd century time frame. He is buried at the, let me make sure I get the pronunciation right. He is at the Basilica Sant'Ambrogio in the, really in the center of Milan. I should have mentioned earlier that the Last Supper is at the Santa Maria Grazie. That is the name of the church where it's located. Anyway, after viewing the tomb of Ambrose, who was a very prominent ecclesiastical figure in his day, we subsequently went over to the airport via the metro, and we were able to get a car that took us on up to northern Italy. So that's going to be another episode speaking about Stresa and the Lake District. Thanks very much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed, and I hope you got a couple of tips of how to do things in the Venice and Milan area. Have a great day. Bye.